Hi, everybody, and we're back for another episode of Wedgie Talk, where I talk with some of the coolest people in the community all about their work, the fetish, their writing, the art, and what's next for them. And on this episode, special episode, episode 11, I have a very good friend of mine, probably one of the greatest dungeon masters in the community that I've had the pleasure of working with, someone I've written with in the past and worked with on some projects, a popular writer who's got some big things in the works I'm excited to talk about, my friend Jack. Thank you very much for being on.
Happy to be here, Hans.
Yeah, so it's great to have you on. I was just looking at some of your stats. You've built up quite the following, 259 watchers, almost 90,000 page views on DeviantArt, which is huge. So before we get too much into the nitty gritty of your work and the exciting news you have to share, I'd love if you could just sort of walk us through sort of who you are in the community, some of the work you've done, and some ideas of what you've been up to in case for those who maybe aren't super familiar with your work.
Okay, well, I'm a writer. That's what I'll say. My I don't really know how I would categorize myself, though. I'd say I'm the person that writes just like the weird kind of stories where it's like, ooh, here's like an idea, and then just sort of trying to go from there, and sometimes succeeding, sometimes not, question mark, depending on your taste as a reader.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so interesting, and I like how you left that kind of vague there. So digging into that a bit, when you talk about sort of weird stories, where did that interest come from in terms of writing? Like, can you take us back to when you first started writing these stories, and why did you decide to start writing ones you call weirder that maybe work, maybe don't? How's that happen?
I'd say it's a combination of having too many ideas and as well as not enough time. So I'll just sort of just take ideas that I've written down on little like note cards. It's just, oh, here's like a one word idea that I wrote down. I like sometimes I don't even remember what the whole idea was. I'll just see the word and be like, okay, I could probably bang something out with this in like an hour or two. And that's usually what my stories end up being. Like, I think the most recent one, so like Wendy's Critical Success, that was just me
Mm-hmm.
being like, hey, there's like an official Wendy's tabletop game. What sort of story could be made of that? And then me just puking out something for 2 or 3 hours on the keyboard and then editing it up a bit and then being like, here guys, enjoy.
So, and I think that's interesting. And I wonder, has that changed? Has that sort of evolved to become how you're writing in the community nowadays, more than maybe when you first started out? Or have you always been taking an idea and just seeing what you can do with it in a few hours?
Uh, I think so. I'll say my writing has three different time periods. There was
Mhm.
my early writing, which anyone who's ever written knows for a fact that their first writing stage is terrible. Basically, fan fiction that, but I try not to look back on that stuff besides being like, ooh, I can't believe I wrote that.
Mhm.
Then there was the second where I was like, I had some time and I'm like, okay, let's write this. And then the third one I like to call the college years, where I started my college education, and turns out there's not a whole lot of time to devote to just, oh, let's sit down for however many hours and like fully flesh out this idea. So that's how the write for a few hours and see what I can come up with style came about.
Mhm. And in terms of content and stuff, you mentioned starting out with fan fictions, and you don't like to look back on that time as much. But turning back the clock a bit, how would you say you've maybe evolved as a writer over time in terms of the stories you're telling, and not just how much time you dedicate to a story, but just what you're writing about, and maybe some of the ideas and themes you're looking to tackle more? Has that evolved over time for you?
Yeah, definitely. As the first stuff I wrote was sort of fan fiction. There wasn't really any underlying. It was just, ooh, here's a character that I or someone that's requested this story likes. Let me just type up some stuff, and at most they would be sort of like a very shallow character analysis of, ooh, here's a character, and they're in a wedgie situation. What's going on? Whereas I feel like as time has gone on, I've tried to incorporate the stuff I've learned in my like college and high school writing classes to be like, okay, what's like the core theme that I can build upon to make it both a better story as well as have an easier time writing, since like once you sort of have a groundwork, I just find it a lot easier to build upon that and see, okay, what type of character would work if I want to tell a story about just like overcoming adversity or just other sort of like ideas.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And just to give us an idea, when would you say you first started writing, and I guess writing wedgie stories as well?
Ooh,
Was that a total different thing? Like, were you writing way before you started doing any stuff for the fetish?
Yeah, I was definitely writing nothing groundbreaking, but just like middle school, high school, I enjoyed writing, and that was sort of my, hey, this is an interesting thing that I like doing. And since then, I've always been interested in character archetypes and just almost like the technical side of let's make a good story.
Mm-hmm.
But sorry, can you quickly repeat it? I just lost my train of thought.
I think you sort of answered it a lot already, but the question was basically on how your writing has maybe evolved over time since you started, and basically when did you start writing, like in terms of timeline wise, when did that all?
To answer the when I started writing, I think that's about 4 years ago. I'm quickly checking my DeviantArt profile because I honestly don't remember. Mm-hmm. But I was like probably 14 or 15, and I was just like, hey, here's people making art and doing just general stuff. Like the young me, foolish as I was like, hey, I could do that. And here I just wound up here now, so yeah, I guess it paid off somewhat.
Yeah. So was it foolish, do you think, to start out? Maybe it sounded like you were hopeful on it.
Just not foolish in a like I enjoy this entire wacky journey that I have been on. It's just that I tend to be very critical of myself of, oh, here's like my first stories, and just seeing all of the stuff I did wrong, or I'll like look at it and be like, oh, joy, I did dialogue like that way, where it's just one continuous run on, or like it's just like not enough description, or it's just, oh, here's a wedgie, okay, thanks for coming by.
Yeah, so like you mentioned, there's definitely been a lot of growth, I guess, overall in how you write and what you're interested in. And I guess on the topic of growth, I'd like to go back, if we can, and sort of, if you're comfortable with it, open up a bit and tell us how the fetish began for you, and what really started you at the very beginning of this quote-unquote wacky journey that you're on.
Okay. Let me think. I'd say my first start in the just with the fetish, not making anything, but just sort of being a lurking content consumer, would have had to be 1 or 2 years before I started making stuff. I vividly remember it was when I was still in like, I think middle school, or around that time, early middle school. I remember always sneaking onto my parents' like iPhone and just going to Experience Project and looking up the stories that were there, and then Yep. And then I also remember eventually finding DeviantArt once. And funnily enough, the way I would find stuff on DeviantArt would be I'd wait until the computer was not in use, and I would sneak on, and it was like my dad's computer, and he's like a technical computer guy, so
Okay.
I'm surprised he never like caught on that I was doing anything, but I would always like get on there like every so often, maybe like once or twice a week, and just be like, okay, no one's watching, quick, like type in DeviantArt and see like, okay, what's the latest art that's been posted.
Yeah. And so from there, you sort of move on to the community. How long is it basically before you move from being a lurker to someone creating content? What's that process like?
You mean time-wise, or just like the overall, like the mindset of why
I
I?
guess both. Yeah, I think it's important for both in terms of time wise, and yeah, what caused the shift? Then you decide, like you mentioned having the thought of being one who said I can do this as well. And what do you think maybe spurred that on? Is it some kind of inherent creativity maybe you've always had, or something like that?
I think it was the like the writing mentors in my life that had no idea about any of what I'm doing now or any of the community stuff. It's just the people where
Mhm.
it's like, oh, hey, here's my middle through high school writing teacher who was like, hey, like, and I like kept in contact with her, and she's just like, hey, like, if you want to write something, just do it. Like, there's no time like the present. Like, you're the only one who's got your ideas in your head. And I
Mhm.
guess I just sort of took both her encouragement as well as her technical critique of, oh, you could improve X, Y, and Z, and then just sort of running with that full force until eventually I was like, wait a minute, I'm making these like little stories for like just myself. I've got this community that I've been lurking on, and at the time I didn't think of it as like, oh, this big community I'm a part of, but I was like, I could probably bang out a story or two, just try it out.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I think that's wonderful. I think that's super cool. And now to pivot away from that, because I think it's fascinating to learn more about your work and sort of how you channel that creativity. As I mentioned before, like probably one of the most creative dungeon masters ever been in contact with, and I've had, I guess, arguably yes, I've had two others as DMs for me. So it's a smaller pool, yeah, but you're certainly an incredibly creative person from your stories, and they've obviously garnered a lot of popularity. And on the note of being a dungeon master and being creative, um, you have some news you want to share, an upcoming project that you want to share exclusively on the podcast that I've heard a bit about. You've told me a bit about, but for those who know nothing about it, never heard anything about it, I think you did make a post. Something was coming right on
Yep.
DeviantArt. You hinted at it. So here's your chance. I'd love to just hear whatever you're able to share and spoil about this upcoming project, what we should know, what we're looking out for, and just lay it down for us.
All right, I've got some notes here, so I'm gonna try my best to succinctly like give the elevator pitch for this and then explain it a bit.
Sounds
So
great.
the project in question is hopefully it will be more than one, but I'm starting off one, just simple. It is called Halls of Humiliation, and it is a Dungeons and Dragons 5e adventure module that has a few sort of pointers about the like ways to run a game like online with people in the community and how to avoid like a bit of awkwardness that might come up due to the fetish nature of like, what we do in the community. There's also optional backgrounds and feats for player characters that are very much in line with the school theme. So backgrounds such as goth or cheerleader you'll be able to play, and all of them have tried to make a creative, similar to the player's handbook, how each background has a distinct trait that they benefit from. I've tried my best to come up with traits that are free form, that sort of could play to both the stereotype of, oh, like here's the goth, that's all, like everyone's afraid of them, as well as possibly alternative takes on those characters. And the main part of it is a adventure that is, and this is where I get onto the technical nerd talk, who, for anyone who's ever played a D&D game, they'll know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Where it's a first to third level adventure for 3 to 4 players that can be played as either just a one-shot for people that may have never played Dungeons and Dragons before. Hey, here's a little slice of it that includes wedgies, just to, because why not? And or it could be used as a jumpstart for a longer running campaign. And to facilitate that, there's also optional rules to turn the normal chaotic and murder hobos of D&D into more yanking hobos that are a lot more slapstick in nature.
Nice. So walk us through the process of how people can get access to this, to the project, and when you're thinking it might roll out eventually for people to be able to play this.
Mm-hmm. So the way I'm going to be releasing it is I'm going to be posting it to Patreon. One of the main reasons being I'm hoping to include artwork within it. So major NPCs within the adventures will have like character portraits, and there will be images of all the different enemies, as well as some illustrations of said enemies attacking some unfortunate stock player characters for viewers viewing entertainment. And there's various tiers that people can pledge to. The main thing of it is there's $5 and higher. I'm setting up a Discord that will facilitate people finding other people who are interested in either running a game or playing it. And I was just going so good, and then my mind just let me really quick my notes. But yeah, it's very exciting.
Yeah.
That. I am so sorry. I'm just
no worries. I think it's fascinating. So just to sort of sum that up, it's so for $5 people can get access to this
the module. The module itself 2 weeks before I post it to public, like deviant art. Wow, can't say that. But
a lot of D's. Yeah. No worries. Okay, so that's fascinating. So why are you also releasing it to the public as well? This first module. Is there made plans to release more exclusive Patreon content?
Yes, there will be exclusive Patreon content for some of the higher tiers. We'll have, I got my notes right here, so I can't forget what I'm gonna say. The higher tiers, there will be exclusive things for certain tiers, such as, got it here, I'm gonna plan on having a raffle link to it, so people can enter into it, and then once a month a winner will be chosen, and they will basically pitch, here's a character, a location, or an artifact, like a magical weapon, and here's its story, or here is just like, oh, here's like a magical hook that always finds the nearest waistband, and then I'll take that and be like, okay, here's like that expanded upon, and here's the stats for it, and here's like how like a DM could incorporate that into their game, as well as the sort of universe I'm setting up, since by default all of the adventures, which I'm hoping to make more of, will have a common world, and people that run it can, just like any adventure, they could say, oh, this sucks. I am going to use my own setting, and they can do that. But just have I like the idea of having like my own little, oh, here is like the lore of the Jack's edition of D&D.
That's awesome. And so I guess the big question is, why did you decide to go forward with this project? What was the sort of, I guess, impetus behind creating D&D themed wedgie content that people could interact with?
So tabletop games in recent years, I'd say about 2.5 years, I got really into tabletop games. Had a start where I tried to make my own for my friends, and it sort of flopped because at the time I had seen one playthrough of knockoff D&D, of someone's homebrew version of D&D, a one shot, and I was like, ooh, that looks fun. I bought some cheap 20-sided dice in Shipshawana on a vacation, and then tried to hobble together. It was basically XCOM and like a bunch of other games, completely unbalanced, but my friends loved it. And ever since, I've just had this like desire to be like, ooh, I really like running these, because it's basically writing a story, except at any moment someone could say, actually, we don't do that, and we go the opposite way, and just having to be like, how does the story adapt to the character's decisions to not try to stop the evil emperor and save the princess?
Wow.
And I feel like making a wedgie themed D&D tabletop was just sort of me combining the two things that have occupied a majority of my time, like my free time, in terms of making stuff for the community and making tabletop games for my friends, and in most recent months for online friends. So it was just sort of a gradual, like, oh hey, here's someone in the community, run a game with them. You know what? That'd be real nice if there was like content for this instead of it just being me making up this one thing. And you definitely know of one of the one things I'm talking about, since you were a player in that.
Yes, yeah, we had some very fun adventures in terms of people taking things in a different direction. We played what was the name of, not the traditional D&D, but is it we renamed it. Is it Everyone's Jack?
Oh, yep, we played D&D, and then since there was more time in the week, I was like, hey, let's play Everyone is John, but all of you were like, hey, this could be like Everyone is Joanne, and I'm like, you know what? Yeah. So we basically took a second tabletop game and wedgified it, because why not? We're on a roll.
Yeah, why not? We had a lot of fun with that. And for people not familiar, Everyone is Joanne is basically you're all playing the same character, and you have certain goals in mind, and you have to push the story and the character to do what you want, and that can affect what the other players want in case they want something totally opposite. So like what you were saying, when someone might want to save the princess, and if someone else's goal is to not save the princess, you can have some very entertaining times trying to see where the story goes. But
one person's goal is to find the cheerleaders, and everyone else is like, nah, fam.
Yeah, I had that happen. It was heartbreaking. Yeah, Chaos Recon still owes me for ruining my fantasy there. But that was a lot of fun. We had some fun, and yeah, we did traditional D&D as well. So I could certainly see, and some people I've talked to recently after chatting with some other people just about D&D, like Alistair Cade or Jack53, he mentioned an interest in D&D, and some others I've spoken to are there. So it seems like there's this interesting overlap and an interest in fantasy and being able to collaborate with other people in the community around something as interactive, and I think is sort of interesting and obviously entertaining as wedgies are for us. So I think that's super interesting. So from there, when do you think we can maybe expect to have the content available to people?
So the current tentative date is sometime in December. I'm currently, I'd say, I don't want to say half, because it's a little more than half.
Mhm.
I'm gotten to the part where I have all of the ideas in my head and I need to solidify them and then make gameplay balances when I realize, ooh, that would kill all the players instantly, even in a rule setting where they're not taking real damage. So,
Mhm.
gotta tweak that.
Well, okay. So December, any idea like mid-December? Or are we waiting till like close to Christmas as a big surprise, or
Well,
is it up in the air right now?
it's currently up in the air. Mid
Okay.
December is the ideal time period, though I don't want to make any hard and fast promises since finals are coming up,
Yeah.
and those can be they can be their own quest to tackle.
Yeah, and usually you don't really have a big party that can join you on
Yeah,
taking out the boss of the exam, yeah.
don't have any magic items for that.
No, that's fair. That's fair. No, so I think that's fascinating. It hears like it sounds like, sorry, you're making some progress on that. Is there anything about the project that you didn't touch on that you think people should know about? Reasons that they should check it out and should keep their ears open for more details?
Uh, now I gotta now I gotta really sell myself in this. So I'd say the target demographic is anyone who likes D&D and wedgies.
Mm.
Though I will say, because I'm going to try to get some art in here, the main thing is it depends on how successful the Patreon backing is. Just
Mhm.
because though I do want to put some money towards it, there's only so much I can take out of the pocket before I'm like, ooh, gotta save some of this for a college debt. But
Yeah, that's
but
fair.
overall, I'm also trying to make it accessible for people that have never played. Uh, one of those being so that Discord server I mentioned, I'm trying to set it up in such a way where people can interact and I'll be there. I'll try to be there most of the time to either answer questions, either specific to what I write or the game as a whole, as well as giving other people a place where, oh, like someone who's never played and might be curious, oh, like what's all of this about, or where do you start? Like in this giant monolith of a game that, like a genre of game that has been around for decades, like how do you start? Which game is the best thing to start off with?
Hmm. Nice. So it sounds like a challenge, right? Having to create something accessible to people unfamiliar with the game who you want to draw in, while also making it mechanically, I guess, something people are familiar with if they play D&D, and something experts can sort of pick up and go, oh yeah, I know what this is about. It's just a fun and more erotic story, I guess.
Hmm.
So that must be a challenge, right?
Yeah, definitely trying to balance all of that. And I've caught myself a few times where I might be jotting something down. And I'm like, wait a minute. Like, if I've ever played, do I know what a DC is? Should I like have a quick aside there? If like the first time I bring it up, just catching myself when like, what are the things I can do to make it both accessible as well as not bogged down by having the stereotypical like what is role playing at the front of the book for like that takes up a few pages when the veterans are like yeah let me get to the real intro here.
Yeah, no, but it sounds like it's coming along, which is exciting. And I guess the other big question is, I guess my questions are basically like, are there hot cheerleaders and nerds and stuff? But beyond that, is there anything about the actual story of it that you can share that you think is okay to not spoil, but give us a hint about what we're maybe getting into beyond the fact it's a D&D based adventure? Is there anything about the actual story you can maybe hint at? You mentioned school. Is there anything there you can go into?
Yeah, I think I can give you a rough. So this is not the intro as written. This is me
Mhm.
sort of ad-libbing what I have in my notes here. But
Okay.
it's so the main adventure of Halls of Humiliation is that there are rumors of this sort of so near the town of Wedgehurts, there is this mountain range, which, like, this is a small town. Nothing really ever big has happened here. Like, nothing legendary. It's like your small town where people pass through to do, like, deliver letters, and they might stop by to pick up, ooh, I'm heading to the next city, but I quickly need a festive gift for, like, my niece's birthday. Like, that's the town you stop by. Like, no one would willingly go there. But there are rumors of underneath the mountain range, there's this, some say it's an old labyrinth that has been lost to time. Others say it's actually the laboratory of some sort of mage who's been up to some experiments. No one's quite sure, but the party will either be, the two intros I have as written are, they'll either be bandits or scallywags, possibly chaotic neutral people trying to make a quick buck, and they've heard about this, or they'll have been hired by a local antique artist to look into the rumors and try to procure a possible item that she believes might be hidden away within the halls of humiliation.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Exciting, and definitely, yeah, not a lot of spoilers there, which is awesome. But I think you've teased out some very interesting details, which are exciting. Yeah, so now we have to wait till maybe mid-December, maybe later. Oh, why would you do this to us, Jack? We maybe can't wait that long. Oh, but this sounds great. This sounds super awesome. Yeah. And just to check, is there, before we move on to a bit of more broader topics, that's some super exciting news. I appreciate you going so in depth with it. Is there anything else about the project you wanted to share? Any other incentives? You mentioned there being art, additional resources for people on that are Patreon exclusive. I guess the big question is going forward in the future. Say it takes off as it probably definitely could, like with all the work you're putting in and from what you brought up. What would the dream be for you in terms of the content, building it out? What would you love to see for it in the future? What's the sort of dream of this project?
So the dream of this project is, I want to make my own sort of lore, sort of how the monster manual, it has, oh, here's this creature and here's a bit of backstory. I want to make something like that fleshes out the sort of setting that I'm coming up with. And I don't think I mentioned the name of it, but I'll just tell it now since it won't spoil anything, but the Sorosphere is what that's my name pending that I think I'll stick with title for this sort of universe of things. I want to sort of flesh that out and say, here's like my D&D world, like, the classical, oh, here's the Tolkien, where, like, Tolkien-esque, where, like, oh, you have the elves hate the dwarves and, like, the feeling's mutual. The halflings don't like to eat a lot of food, and the humans are just sort of there. I want to, like, have my own sort of ideas of, okay, here's like the origin story of this world. Here's all the different species and how they play off each other, and possibly try to circumvent the typical tropes of, like, not in a way of disrespecting it, but just in a way of, okay, like, elves might still be a bit snooty at times, but, like, here's my take on that snootiness, and it might not be all of them, like, that sort of thing, as well as potentially making numerous adventures. Having more than one adventure is definitely the next step in this.
Yeah.
And then possibly expanding onto other sort of game systems, though at the current moment that is not the main focus. That's just if backers want me possibly, cyberpunk, like what rules for that system, or Jack, make your own. Like, if people want that would be something I'd be keen on delivering. But overall, it's just taking this current thing and then just multiplying it exponentially. So there's like basically that, except like, ooh, now here's something about the elves. Here's something about the dwarves. Oh, here's like an entire world that people can freely grab, tweak, modify, or like throw like the normal Tolkien in with that and be like, what's gonna happen now?
Yeah. No, that's fascinating. And I think super exciting, something for us to look forward to for sure, which is great. And I guess to pivot off that for a minute as well, you mentioned sort of broadening it out, maybe looking at different genres and stuff. The cool thing about your work, I think, is that you've written about so many different, I guess you could call them universes almost, right? Like, do you want to maybe talk a bit about some of the fact that you've done like everything from you've done some I think My Little Pony stuff and both on D&D and I guess story wise as well, and it seems like you're not one who just sticks to one kind of genre, and it sounds like in the fantasy you mentioned putting your own twist on these more familiar archetypes and things like that. So can you just sort of walk us through some of the other content you've written about and some of the other genres you've sort of delved into and why those have been of an interest to you as well?
Mhm. I know off the top of my head, I can explain the My Little Pony stuff because that's the one that you just brought up. So to explain that, specific to that, when I first got into the community, one of the content creators that I saw a lot of was a guy that went by the name of Dr. Cobra, who
Mm-hmm.
did traditional art, and it was typically like MLP characters in the sort of not fully anthropomorphic, but enough to where, oh, they're standing on two legs and they have clothes, the bare minimum for this specific kind of thing. And that sort of influenced me being like, hey, I guess I'll write a story or two about that. I've also ran one with a small group of people that are in that corner of the community. But my you could call me a bard because I'm a jack of many trades when it comes to uh, consuming content.
Mm-hmm.
I'll either find a series and I'll just sort of be like, a series, like latch onto it, and then just sort
Yeah.
of be like, what does this contain? I'm the kind of person that like deep dives the wiki to be like, okay, what's like the juicy bits of this? Like, what's the cool story things?
Yeah.
And then even stuff I've never seen, like most recently with I think Steven Universe
Yeah.
during the fall break, I've latched onto that and I haven't even been watching full episodes. I've just been watching YouTube snippets and I'm already like, I sort of have a working understanding of like the sphere or timeline and how things relate to each other. And I just
Yeah.
sort of take bits and bobs from stuff and just say, hey, what if I took that and this and made a new thing?
Interesting. Yeah, no, I think that's super cool. And I think what's super cool is you mentioned being influenced by what you've seen and some of the writers when you first sort of came onto DeviantArt. So I'm curious now, after you said, I guess 4 or 5 years after being a creator yourself, writing stories, building up like Tugs Underwear, for example, and doing the work you've done there, and now sort of taking off with this new project. What advice do you have as someone who's been around the block now for a while, for new creators who are maybe looking to start maybe writing or producing their own projects that haven't been done before, like you with the D&D? What advice do you have for any aspiring creatives now?
I would definitely say you just sort of have to do it, but you
Mm-hmm.
have to temper it. So, like, if you have an idea for a story, it's like, that is great. Like, pursue it. You're the person with that story. So, like, just put it down on paper. Like, even if it's like a year later that you actually post it, that's still like you're getting something down and you are like expressing yourself. Though the tempering part is like knowing what sort of like, so when I started out, the tempering part would be knowing, okay, I have no like substantial audience, so I probably wouldn't have been able to be like, here's a project that needs like backing on Patreon, since
Mm-hmm.
like the amount of people knowing my username or my work was like non-existent. So just sort of knowing what are the strengths that you have and what do you still need to work on for certain things to be feasible. But like
Mm-hmm.
average run of the mill, oh, want to make a story and publish it? Like, no, not publish, just like upload. Sorry, publishing is a whole nother thing. Um, uploading is just, if you have a keyboard, a screen, and a few hours, and just a little bit of imagination, you can bang out a work. And even if it's not the greatest thing, you can take what you've learned, like what you learned from that, either like make it, look at it the next day, and if you're like, geez, what, like, who wrote this? Like, make some tweaks. Like, that's better than nothing. Like, you're, as long as you can learn from it and do good going forward, then go for it.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. I think that's really fantastic advice. Do it, but temper it, I think is brilliant and not advice we often hear. So I think that's really great. Sounds like you've taken the experiences and the knowledge you've sort of gained from over the years, and I think you touched on some of it, the writing teachers and everything from the new community, from the community members you've read coming into it, and being a consumer of so much diverse content. It sounds like it's all come together for you in the new projects you're working on, which is super exciting as well. Yeah. So I think that answers my main questions. Is there anything you wanted to bring up? Any questions or concerns, or maybe just to speak about the community in general? Is there anything you wanted to chat about with that in terms of what you think of the community nowadays?
The only real thing that I have on my mind, and I've been thinking about it lately, is just sort of the, both for people, so this is sort of a dual statement for people that have either been here a while or and newer people, is to sort of, for people that have been here, try to remember what it was like for you when you first got here. I know like quite a few people, based on the people I've RP'd with, were pretty young when we got into this, and we had no idea what we were doing. So like some of the people that have been around, just sort of like being a little bit patient. If, oh, here's someone that like they're younger, they have no idea what they're doing with their stories, like trying to like give constructive criticism instead of giving into the whole just they're being annoying, block them. But the second thing, then going to the younger people, of try to keep in mind that like a lot of times, like, and I've seen it where someone will get blocked and someone will take offense, that oftentimes, because the internet is sort of this nebulous, like, ooh, I will never see any of these people possibly, like, ever. Yeah. That it's easier to for people to say, okay, here's something, get it, like an annoyance, gonna block that, but that people shouldn't take that inherently, oh, like this content creator you really liked, but then they blocked you because you were like really eager and you kept messaging them. That may not be, like, you don't see it as, oh, they hate you, they don't want anything to do with you, but more as like just that some people, there's different tolerances of, okay, like I can handle people messaging me, but other people might be like, oh, this person like private messaged me like twice in the same day, and like I'm gonna block them. So just keeping in mind that like a block or someone ignoring you doesn't mean that you did something or that they don't like you. It could be, oh, they just have a busy schedule or something. So just trying to remind people on both sides of experience that, hey, everyone's a person here, so like try to have some goodwill and stuff. But I don't know, I'm rambling a bit at this point, but I think you get what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think so. I think the idea of patience, right, on both sides of it. And as you said, I think you summed it up wonderfully when you said the importance of having goodwill, right? Because we don't call it a community for nothing. I think if we want to keep true to the promise of what that means, I think that requires some patience for the new members with the older, if they're not getting back to you, and with the older members who've been around and maybe have lost some of the same maybe enthusiasm or just pure excitement and energy that some of the younger ones have, maybe coming up trying to do a lot, and maybe it's not as refined as some of the older ones. And I think it's a balance of coming to terms with I think you summed it up beautifully, and something we rarely ever hear. It's for the members who've been around for a few years, not forgetting how they were when they started, right? Because I think we're all far more similar than we sometimes think, and being able to hold on to that goodwill, I think, is key if we want to grow as a group of people who share this unusual but very interesting wedgie fetish, I think. So I think you said it beautifully, and I appreciate that. I think that's really great.
Mhm.
So from there, is there anything else you want to touch on in terms of your work, your time in the community, the new project that we haven't touched on that you want to sort of sum us up or leave us off with? Any nice final thoughts?
I think that's it. Besides from, please go check out the Patreon, please.
Do you have
That's
a
pretty
name
much.
for that yet? Do you have a name for
Yes.
Patreon? Well, we're gonna
So
look for it.
the Patreon, I have called it Jack's. Hold on. Got it. Okay. Jack's Wedgie Tabletop Workshop is what I have named it because I liked the ring of that. So, yep.
Nice. So mid-December, if not later, I'm going to try to hold you to some of that because I can't wait much longer than that.
Mhm.
It'll be around Christmas. I'll be dying for something, a nice present. So that'll be great. I'm looking forward to it. I want to thank you very much for taking the time for being on here and talking about your work, your introduction to the community, and sort of and the exclusive project coming up. I'm excited. Or what will be exclusive for a little bit, but just the
Mhm.
whole idea of the first ever, I guess, D&D wedgie fetish focused project that we'll have to enjoy in the next little while. I'm super excited for that. So thanks again for all of it.
Yep. Happy to be here and to share what was on my mind.
Always great. So thanks again, and thanks again for listening, everybody. I'll see you all soon, and keep being awesome. Bye for now.
See ya.